what do you consider to be the objective, not subjective, but objective definition of human life?
I would just say I would say someone who's breathing, has a heartbeat,
Yeah.
able to breathe and live on their own.
Okay. Sure.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know where the line is exactly, but I would say if you can breathe and your heartbeat's on your own, then you're alive.
Yeah, that's about where medicine puts that line, actually. Yeah. So, having actually, I think it's defined as having just a little bit more than brainstem activity.
Mm-hmm.
So your brainstem it's your cardiorespiratory drive. That's what
Yeah.
makes your heart beat and your lungs inflate. So you have to have just a little bit more than that. And at that point, you have to have some very basic reflexes that are inspired by that. That's where we rule on whether somebody's in a complete vegetative or brain dead state.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd announce clinical death.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an interesting line. So how do you personally define human life?
I would just say that someone who's able to live life.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're not functioning, to me, if you're not living, if you're not awake and living and able to do what people do, like, what is the point of living? Are you really living if you're in a vegetative state in a bed and you don't even know you're unconscious?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? That's what most people use in their definition, and everybody I've interviewed so far included in their definition of what they personally hold to be human life is an amount of functionality and a quality of life.
Yeah.
That functionality usually ensures.
Yeah. If you're not functioning, are you living, or you're just here?
It's an interesting philosophical question.
It is, until you get put in the position where you have to make those decisions, especially if it was involving your child or something. Then I can't say what my definition would be.
Absolutely.
So.
It all changes when it's personal, and we see that change. We see that change a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, in our work. So, what is quality of life?
Quality of life is being able to enjoy life. I don't want to live a life where I can't do the things I want to do.
Sure.
I want to be able to be happy and enjoy.
Yeah.
Do what I want and be happy. Yeah.
Yeah. So you want enough functionality to experience joy, to lend joy to others.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what are some of the sensory perceptions you require as baseline for your definition of quality of life?
Well, obviously, I would want to be conscious, and I would want to be able to laugh and love and smile, and as long as I could do that, as long as I stayed smiling, I think I'd be all right. I don't know. If I lost all the dopamine in my brain and I wasn't able to be happy, I don't know if I would want to live.
Okay. Yeah, so you'd want at least, vocalization abilities, the articulation of your facial muscles, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And maybe an auditory capacity to understand what people are saying to you.
Yeah, I mean, even if I
or at least visual capacity if you don't have auditory.
Yeah, some of those, so at least I could communicate. I might not be vocal, or I might not hear, but as long as I could communicate with people around me, and
that's a good quality of life for you.
Yeah,
I would consider that for me to be an excellent quality of life too.
Yeah.
Well, I shouldn't call it excellent, but
well,
I call it
excellent
enough.
would be like shopping and
wakeboarding.
Yes,
obviously is included in there. Yeah, playing paintball, stuff like that. Yeah, the basic baseline activities of a normal.
Yeah, shopping and paintball.
Yeah, activities of daily living, right?
Yes.
So, what allows patients to have decision-making capacity in regards to healthcare?
Well, I would say either paperwork that says they already made the decision when they were able.
Okay.
But being coherent, being able to show that they understand what they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, we do a very basic assessment just to determine that you are oriented to your surroundings and the situation at hand. And that's basically how we determine if somebody can consent from themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when patients lack decision-making capacity, what happens?
Well, it goes to the chain of command
Yeah.
is what I would call it. I don't know the exact laws,
Yeah.
but I'm pretty sure it goes to the wife or the children or whoever they designated in the paperwork before
Yeah.
it happened for
You
them
nailed
to,
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
You actually nailed it. I think it's spouse, adult children, parents, brothers and sisters, and then extended family, and then if all of that's not even available, then friends, neighbors.
Yeah, I think we've seen that before. I think
Right.
we've also seen what happens when you don't have those wishes
We do.
beforehand on paper, and it creates a mess.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so, yeah, some of the documentation we're talking about here would be a medical power of attorney. So that form of documentation allows you to grant the privileges of consenting on your behalf when you're incapacitated to a person of your choosing.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. It's free.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You can fill them out, and it's a very simple process. But anybody can do that.
I think it's scary to a lot of people, like when they don't have it, and you ask them, "Do you have this?" And to them, it's like you're signing papers that say,
I think there's a lot of misconceptions around.
Yeah, a lot of people don't have it.
Yeah, I've rarely seen them. I'm talking maybe as many times as I can count on fingers and toes in my entire career.
Usually when
I've
people
seen
are older, I think a lot of younger people think, "Oh, I don't need that. I'm not going to die
Sure.
for a long time." So,
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so we also have things like, besides the medical powers of attorney, we have advanced directives, right? And an advanced medical directive is kind of, you can get a lot of different formats of them. The standard one I usually see will start with I want or do not want cardiorespiratory resuscitation.
Okay, yeah. So do not resuscitate.
DNR is usually at the top of that advanced medical directive. Next, it moves on to things like forced air ventilation.
So the difference between that is kind of just the difference between the two would be one saying what the person's wishes are in certain situations, and the other one saying who's going to take control
Exactly.
if something goes wrong.
Exactly.
Okay. I did not know that before.
Yeah. Well, and what's really interesting that a lot of people don't know either is that an advanced medical directive, so I've said, I never want to have tube feedings, ever. That can be overridden.
By a doctor?
No.
No?
By
By family?
whoever's consenting on your behalf. Instantly.
They just would not be honoring your wishes. That's all it
Exactly.
would be.
That's exactly right. And it's a big misconception a lot of people don't know about.
Yeah.
Yeah, we run into it quite a bit more than people would think. And yeah, one of the things that I think disturbs a lot of the people I've worked with, especially nurses or physicians, is when we see an advanced medical directive that says what the person wants, and when the family directly overrides those wishes.
Yeah.
And will readily tell us they even expressed this personally to them, that they didn't want any of this, but still has its due procedures.
So what happens in the situation where the person wants to be resuscitated? Is the family able to say, no, we don't want them resuscitated?
Yeah, so you default, that's an interesting question. So yes, it's a great question.
Because they might have
I really like your lines of
alternative
questioning.
motives.
All right, yes. So yeah, everybody defaults to full code status, right?
Yes.
So we will do everything we can do for you if we do not have an advanced medical directive. So by just simply not filling one out, you're going to get all of the services we can provide. Now, when you become incapacitated, whoever's consenting on your behalf can initiate a do not resuscitate order because they're consenting on your behalf.
Yeah.
So it's of paramount importance, that a person, when deciding who's going to be their medical power of attorney, that they choose somebody that will in fact carry out their wishes.
Yeah.
So something like that
Things
might not
happen though, and the ex-wife sometimes ends up.
I can imagine there's
the one with the
there's
life
stories.
insurance policy.
Yeah, I can imagine there's some
I don't
stories.
know.
But yeah, no, that's a really, really good, valid question. So, what do you think is the ethical importance of carrying out patients' wishes when they're incapacitated?
I think it should be done at all times.
Yeah.
I don't think it would be ethical to not do it.
Absolutely.
But I guess if the law says that their family can change those wishes or then that's what the law says.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can act unethically or immorally, and I
Hmm.
mean, it's still within the bounds of the law.
Yeah.
But you have to imagine that it makes a lot of people really sad to see things like that happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really disappointing situation when we're told over and over again that he would never want a tracheostomy or a feeding tube.
And then it gets one.
Yeah,
I think that those everything changes when you get into with the children, though. It seems like, because can't an adult say, I don't want this chemotherapy. I just want to, go home and
sure.
end my life. But when a parent says that, sometimes the hospital gets involved, and
Yeah, so this isn't something I can really talk about because I don't have,
yeah,
I don't really
I'm
have
taking
the
it to
ethics
another.
background. Yeah, I haven't worked in pediatrics. My experience in pediatrics is limited to training school nurses, um, which I do part time, or training nurses that care for medically fragile kids
Mhm.
that would normally live in a subacute setting or a home setting. So I don't have a lot of experience with those kinds of decisions, but I do imagine that an ethics committee would get involved with parents with children under the age of 18 when the parents
Yeah.
want to initiate, say, something like a do not resuscitate order,
Mhm.
or deny certain treatments to their children. I imagine, yeah, there's probably a lot of child protective services that get involved at that stage,
Yeah.
and can intervene with those health decisions. I actually should get a pediatric nurse to go over that stuff because that's actually a fascinating topic to
Yes,
talk about.
it is.
So, have you had experiences um, where you've seen patients' wishes not granted by their default decision makers?
Um, yeah, I've seen a patient's family, um, pretty much it seemed like they wanted to just get rid of him. Like
Oh, okay.
they wanted it to be done with. Um, Nothing. I don't know what I can't really talk about. But yeah, and then I mean a lot of what I have seen is children, and a lot of times in those situations, parents get kicked out of the situation because for certain reasons, and then they're no longer making those choices because the safety of the child is brought up. But yeah.
Yeah. All right. So, have you observed a lack of understanding in patients or default decision makers in regards to healthcare decisions?
Yeah, I think a lot of patients, I mean, I feel like the whole community has a lack of understanding with all that. And a lot of times they come in and get told, well, you don't get to make that decision, this person does. And then they're like, why? What do you mean? I'm the wife, or I'm this, or I'm that, or I've been living with this person for 10 years. He hasn't even been with this ex wife, but, they're still married, so.
Yeah. And what about in regards to like just basic healthcare decisions? Do you think people are well enough educated to make their own basic healthcare decisions?
No, not at all. I think healthcare can be very confusing for a lot of people
Yeah.
unless you've been in the healthcare field, you've studied it.
Mhm.
It can be really confusing.
Yeah, and I think one of the big reasons is we really lack, the sufficient amount of time to educate people appropriately.
Yeah.
Um, when I talk about when I try to give education on like say like a tracheostomy or something like that, I have maybe 5 to 15 minutes of my total shift to.
And I don't think they're paying attention half the time. It just seems
It's
like they have so much other stuff on their mind. They want to get out of the hospital. They're like, I'll read the paperwork later.
Yeah, there's a lot of emotions at play. There's a lot of drastic changes happening that are at play, um, and just if you've had no, like she said, she's exactly right. If you've had limited or no exposure to the healthcare world, then all of this is truly alien to you.
Yeah, it's like another language.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, what are some common educational disparities you've seen in your patients or their, default decision makers?
Well, in my line of work in the epilepsy monitoring unit, I work with a lot of people who live in group homes, or they're adults. They could be 26 years old, but they might have the they're developmentally delayed. They could be 12. And so they're not able to make their own decisions. They might have a caretaker that makes their decisions for them, and or a person that might not really know what they want or what their wishes really are, or may not understand, or it's hard to watch an adult not be able to make their own decisions.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Yeah, and I think usually in those situations they probably have a case manager, right?
Yeah, or a case manager
Assigned by the
somebody,
state or whatever authority is
depending if
delegated
that
to do it.
person, I'm sure they have a lot of patients, a lot of clients, and they're overworked, and who knows if the patient's wishes are really getting met or what they really need. You would hope so.
Yeah, yeah. It's a tough situation to see, I imagine. Yeah.